Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. If you want to learn how to support the channel and its mission to normalize atheism and deconversion, stay tuned to the end of the video. Welcome to the Deconverter's Bible study. Today I'm continuing the Bible study called When God Kills. When I look at the various times Scripture describes God killing people directly or indirectly. Today we're looking at the story which chronicles the defeat of the king of Heshbon, named Sihon. In this passage, Moses is recounting the conquest of Canaan up until that point, and in this part, he's recounting the defeat of Sihon, the king of Heshbon. And so I'm going to summarize the story. You can certainly read it for yourself. It's found in Deuteronomy 2:24 through 37. But basically, God tells Moses, I've given the Amorite into your hand, the Sihon, the king of Heshbon, and his country, and he wants to begin to take possession of it and engage him in battle. God basically says, I will start to put the terror and fear into the nations. This is like the first conquest that the children of Israel do, and they will hear reports of you and will tremble in anguish because of you. So the whole idea is to build up fear of the Israelites when they come into land, which seems not to have a purpose, seeing that the entire purpose by God's standard is to wipe them all out. So the story goes that they sent messengers to Sihon, the king of Heshbon, and offered him peace, which was a deceptive lie. They just said, we want to pass through your country, we'll stay on the main road, we won't turn to the right to the left. You can sell us food, drink, and for the price of silver, but let us pass through on foot. All because of the descendants of Esau that lived in that area. But Sihon refused to let them pass through. And the passage says literally this in verse 30, for the Lord your God had made his spirit stubborn and his heart obstinate in order to give him into your hands, and he is now done. In other words, Moses is basically admitting that God hardened Sihon's heart so that he wouldn't, give him a spirit of stubbornness so that he wouldn't do anything. That it's not Sihon's own spirit of stubbornness. It says God had made his spirit stubborn and his heart obstinate. In other words, God was very directly involved in the emotional manipulation of Sihon. Okay, and all for the purpose of delivering his country over to them, and so he could possess the land. And then he recounts the fact that the army came out to meet him at Jahaz at the battle. The Lord God delivered him over to us, and we struck him down together with his sons and his whole army. Okay, so complete destruction. Here's one of the great lines of Scripture. We left no survivors, but the livestock and the plunder from the towns we had captured we carried off for ourselves. From Aor to the rim of Aaron Gorge, down to the gorge, all this land was taken over. God gave it all to us according to the command of our God. We didn't encroach on the land of the Amorites because we weren't ready for that. Some points to bring out from this story. It is interesting that this God offers no enlightened rule to the pagan people of Canaan. He only seems to be interested in getting them out of the way. There's definitely some humans are better and more important than others in God's view. Okay, so just decides that these people are in his way. They're part of, they're taking over land that he had promised, and so he's going to destroy them. God, Yahweh, always has to rule by fear and intimidation. He wants to make his people something that is fearful and intimidating, in his own image, so to speak. So instead of a plan of, appeasing the Amorites and the various Canaanites and saying, hey, there's this empty land over here you guys can have that's actually pretty good too. This land I promised to my people. And God doesn't seem to have that persuasive ability to do that. So the only option he has is to send his people in, fight for them, and kill their enemies. There's also an aspect in this where God is being deceptive, that basically instructs his people to lie in order to conquest this area. God's instruction, Moses, is to lie on his behalf, well knowing he tends to destroy the people of Heshbon. Some would argue maybe this deception is part of war, but why would an omnipotent God need to be deceptive? Couldn't he just say, you're all going to die now, and then kill them? Strange that Yahweh has to use the same tactics in psychological warfare as human rulers. The other part is God is going to harden the heart of the king of Heshbon on purpose. It indicates that Sihon was probably willing to go along with the idea of letting the Israelites go through if they spared him and his people. But God, much like he did with Pharaoh, has to stack the deck in his favor of his plan by hardening the heart of Sihon, so he's guaranteed a war that will lead to the absolute genocide of the people of Heshbon. When you look at the results, there's a complete genocide and annihilation of a group of people. Their culture, everything ceases to exist, and God and his people are happy about it. King Sihon and his sons are killed. The army of Heshbon is completely destroyed. All the towns of Heshbon are completely destroyed. They are given over to God by destroying them, giving the Hebrew words used. Every man, woman, and child is killed. There are no survivors by the tech's own admission. There's no saving of young virgin girls this time as war brides, so that's a difference. Instead, they're all killed off, so this is a complete genocide. The livestock and the plunder are carried off, and people take possession of it. So basically, it's pretty typical of warfare in that period that if we wipe somebody out, we get their stuff. An age-old human thing. Strange that God seems to have the same attitude as many other humans throughout history. Just take it, destroy it, and take their stuff. Doesn't really put him on a higher moral plane when it comes to war. Puts him right down in the dirt with everybody else. There's no enlightened rule by God under the law of God for the Amorites or for the people of Heshbon, but rather the same way the brutal conquerors have done for millennia by the sword, death, and destruction. God isn't really showing us any enlightened rulership of how he can bring people together. He only has his people and everybody else be damned. God can't convince others to join him by showing how enlightened his rule would be, but rather he conquers them like everybody else. We also see a God who needs to have his people get his hands bloody. He is supposedly all-powerful, but he has to use deception, the hardening of his foeman's heart, mind control basically, to get his victory. He doesn't act on his own. I mean, he could literally defeat these people all by himself if he's all powerful, but somehow he's got to drag his people down into that level where he kills everybody. He wants everybody dead, so they've got to participate. Once again, we see God cares very little for any human life unless they're serving him. They're just things to end on a whim. He kills women and children in this story, and that would have included infants, so God really isn't all that pro-life in this story either. In my mind, the story might indicate Moses is running the show, and using Yahweh's excuse for his brutality. After all, it is Moses recounting this story. Now, I am really sure that Moses doesn't exist for the same reason I don't believe Hercules exists or Perseus, or, they may have been heroes, but their story has been greatly exaggerated. Well, I think Moses is kind of a conglomerate character that the Hebrew writers put together in the 600, BC and following, when they started putting together all these stories. They had to have a mythological account of their founding, and so Abraham, Moses, and all that stuff become that. But if Moses was a real person, you could see how at this point he's using God, Yahweh, as an excuse for his own evil. He's the one recounting the story after all, and God's command becomes an easy, I didn't do it, God ordered it, so we had to do it. So even though the Israelites may have had very mixed feelings about genociding an entire group of people, he could have easily used that and said, well, hey, God told us to do it. And so it might be a reflection on the leadership's own brutal nature. But I think that what's particularly damning about this thing is if God has the power to harden somebody's heart without supposedly violating their free will. I can already hear the apologists saying, yeah, but he was already headed that way, and all God did was push him down that free will direction and, just made it. Well, except God has to have his victory here. He has to have his win. This is a very early part of the conquest of Canaan, and he has to look strong and powerful. And so he has this apparent desire to conquer. He can't have Sihon having a change of heart and saying, yeah, go ahead, go right on through, okay? Instead, God has to instruct his messengers to lie about it. Oh, we're just going to buy stuff from you and pass on our way through. You can sell our stuff for silver, all this. That's all fabrication by the messengers sent by God. So, you could argue, oh, well, God didn't actually lie. But I would have to argue then, yeah, but he did instruct his people to lie. And that's the real problem. If the lie came from him, the idea to lie, what the lie had to have in it came from him. So yes, he does lie, and he doesn't seem to have a problem with lying to people that aren't his people. But it brings up the mind control aspect of it, that, okay, so God can harden people's hearts without violating their free will, but why can't he soften people's hearts without doing the same? Why can't he use his all-powerful persuasive methods and things to get people to cooperate with him? He could have very easily got the lie to be true. We're just going to pass through. This really isn't land that I promised to Moses or to Abraham or to Moses or to anybody else or to you. So let's just pass through, have a good relationship. These that are descendants of Esau in this area. So, I've given my promise to them as well. Why doesn't he just soften the heart of Sihon? Or Sihon says, you know what? I know God promised this to his people. Give me a chance to leave. Okay, and find, we'll become pilgrims and vagabonds on the earth until we find a place. And if they, he could have softened their heart to bow their knee, so to speak, to Yahweh God. But he doesn't do that. God never seems to have the ability to soften people's hearts. He always wants to push people in a direction where it leads to war, where it leads to suffering, where it leads to genocide, where he's always guiding and directing things towards that end. And a lot of times apologists will come up with the excuse, oh, yeah, but it's, because these people were so evil. I don't know. You have no real good evidence for that. That's pure conjecture. But even if so, are we saying that the one thing about the character of Yahweh throughout the Old Testament is apparently people can become so evil that he doesn't have the persuasive power to persuade them somewhere other direction. He can harden their heart in that direction of being wicked and evil, but he can't seem to soften it to stop being so evil and that sort of thing. He always seems to be able to reinforce people's quote-unquote sinfulness, but he can't reinforce or soften their heart to righteousness. He always has to seem to go down the one direction. And I think this story, if it illustrates anything, it illustrates that God has an agenda, and his agenda is always death and destruction. It's never to try to persuade people to do the right thing. And I think that's become the real problem that I've had with the character of Yahweh throughout my time as being a theist, throughout all this other stuff. Through my deconversion, I began to realize how evil this character is. The real sad part about the Old Testament God is everybody's convinced that he's the good guy, but when you really look at his actions, he's the bad guy who is so evil, he persuades everybody that he's the good guy. He has to have everybody inflating his ego, worshiping him. He doesn't really have this notion of persuasion, providing enlightened rule. He's just a brutal war god that leads his people to more and more war and suffering for others. He never really, where's the good that comes out of this? And it just doesn't seem to exist. So it's kind of my take on this passage. God, when God lies to you and hardens your heart so he can kill you, is really probably going to be the title of this one. So poor King Sihon, I'm glad he didn't really actually exist, and I'm really glad this story probably really didn't happen. Although back in that time period, stories like this probably were pretty common. It was kind of a brutal period. And of course, we want to blame our gods for it, instead of taking personal responsibility. That tends to be the way things go in the ancient world. The divines told us to do it, so therefore we do it. It's an old con, a con that's been around for a while. So there you go. But I'd be interested in your thoughts. This is the Deconverter's Bible study after all. So, put your thoughts in the comments and as we take a look at this story. This is just my thoughts on it to kind of get the ball rolling. So for those of you doing this, for the future of the Deconverter's Bible study as of this video, I'm going to probably, this is one of the things that I won't premiere anymore, the Bible study. What I am going to do is once it's completed, I'm going to give it over to my membership. They'll be able to view it first for about 12 hours or until Wednesday at a certain time, and probably 6 o'clock, and then I'll make it fully live for everybody. But that gives my members, if you're a member of this, you'll get a first crack at the Bible study and comments on it, and for a period of time that I can respond to without all the other comments getting in the way. So that's going to be one of your benefits with this Bible study is being able to see it first. So thank you for your understanding on that. As always, I appreciate every like, share, and subscribe, so thank you very much. I appreciate all those. If you want to support the channel and its mission to normalize atheism and deconversion, to help people understand that becoming an atheist and deconverting from religion is a normal thing and shouldn't be worthy of contempt or ire by anybody. If you want to support that idea, there's many ways to do it. I have my PayPal link in the description, but there's also super thanks, super chat, whatever you want to do there. But the best way is, of course, to become a member, to become a citizen of the Rabyd Nation, and giving me your monthly support, because that allows me to worry less and less about the YouTube algorithm and focus more and more on, doing the videos you come to enjoy and love. So that's kind of my biggest pitch is membership is the best way to support any content creator. So, if you have somebody besides me that you want to support, I would encourage that route as well. It really does encourage us content creators to do better and better work. It really does, at least for me. And as always, live your best life. You only get one go around and then it's over. There's no afterlife that's ever been proven, so you might want to take all your time, money, and opportunities and make the most of the one life that you do have here in this world. And so take all that stuff and give it to yourself, to the people you love and care for, to make this a better world. Don't waste it on the trappings of religion and faith. That's a dead end. I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.